My child, pause here for a moment, because what you are about to hear was not placed before you by accident. Do not rush past these words. Something has shifted in the heart of the person connected to you, and heaven wants you to understand what happened before doubt convinces you that it meant nothing. There was a moment, quiet, unexpected, and far more powerful than anyone around them realized, when your soulmate looked at you differently. They did not simply notice your clothes, your face, your smile, or the way you carried yourself. They saw something deeper moving through your appearance, something no mirror could fully reveal. And then, in front of everyone, they said something that changed the atmosphere completely. Stay with me, because the words they spoke were not what anyone expected. Even the people who believed they understood your soulmate were surprised. Some became silent. Some exchanged confused glances. One person tried to laugh, but the laughter disappeared almost as quickly as it began. Your soulmate had been admiring you quietly for longer than you know, but until that moment, they had never allowed the truth to rise so openly. They had hidden behind casual expressions, controlled reactions, and carefully chosen words. Yet when they saw you that day, something within them refused to remain hidden. You may have thought your appearance was ordinary. Perhaps you adjusted something at the last moment. Perhaps you wondered whether you looked good enough. Maybe there was even a quiet insecurity in your mind, a small voice telling you that others would notice every flaw you believed you carried. But heaven saw the truth. You were not simply wearing an outfit. You were carrying the visible evidence of everything you had survived. There was strength in the way you entered that space. There was healing in the way you held your head. There was a quiet dignity surrounding you that could not be purchased, copied, or manufactured. Your soulmate noticed it instantly. They saw the softness you had protected despite disappointment. They saw the confidence beginning to return after seasons that tried to take it away. They saw a light around you that made everything else in the room seem less important. And this is where the story becomes deeper, because your soulmate was not prepared for their own reaction. Before you appeared, they had been speaking normally with the people around them. Their voice was steady. Their attention seemed divided between ordinary conversation and the events unfolding nearby. No one suspected that anything meaningful was about to happen. But the instant they noticed you, their entire energy changed. They stopped listening to the person beside them. Their eyes followed you without permission. Their thoughts became still, as though every distraction had suddenly been removed. Someone near them noticed. At first, that person smiled and made a playful comment. They asked why your soulmate had become so quiet. Another person turned to look at you, trying to understand what had captured their attention. Your soulmate attempted to look away, but they could not completely hide what was happening. Their expression had already revealed too much. They were not simply impressed by your beauty. They were moved by you. Do not skip this, because there is a difference between being noticed and being deeply recognized. Many people can compliment an appearance. Many can admire a smile, a hairstyle, a color, or a graceful presence. But what your soulmate experienced went far beyond admiration. Something inside them recognized the person they had been trying not to think about. They saw the one who had quietly become part of their private hopes. They saw the one whose absence had created questions they could not answer. They saw the one they had compared everyone else to without ever admitting it. You. And while those around them expected a simple comment, your soulmate said something no one saw coming. But before I reveal those words, you must understand what had been happening inside their heart before that moment. For days, perhaps even weeks, they had been wrestling with a growing realization. They had tried to convince themselves that their feelings were temporary. They told themselves that admiration would pass. They believed distance would quiet the connection. They assumed time would make your presence less powerful in their thoughts. It did not. The more they tried to reduce what they felt, the more clearly your importance appeared. Ordinary moments reminded them of you. A song carried the memory of your voice. A familiar place made them imagine you standing there. A simple conversation with someone else left them wondering what you would have said. Even when they smiled, part of them noticed that the smile felt incomplete because it was not being shared with you. They did not tell anyone the full truth. They allowed others to believe they were fine. They allowed people to assume their heart was uncomplicated. They changed the subject whenever your name came too close to the surface. But their silence was not emptiness. Their silence was full of you. Then came the moment when they saw your look. There was something different about you, though you may not have realized it. It was not only the fabric you wore or the way you had prepared yourself. Your spirit had changed. You were no longer asking the room for permission to belong. You were no longer shrinking so others could remain comfortable. You were beginning to carry yourself like someone who had finally understood that being overlooked never reduced your value. Your soulmate saw that transformation. They saw the person you had always been becoming. For one brief second, their face softened completely. The walls disappeared. The careful distance vanished. And those around them witnessed a version of your soulmate that rarely comes forward, the honest version, the vulnerable version, the version that does not know how to pretend when the heart has already spoken. Someone beside them whispered, "You really like the way they look, don't you?" Your soulmate could have laughed. They could have denied it. They could have offered a harmless compliment and moved on. That is what everyone expected. Instead, they continued looking at you and said, "It is not what they are wearing. It is the way they make everything around them feel different." The room became quiet. Those words surprised everyone because they were not casual. They carried history. They carried emotion. They revealed that your soulmate had been paying attention to more than anyone realized. The people around them understood instantly that this was not a passing attraction. Your soulmate had not described your appearance. They had described your impact. And there was more. One person asked what they meant. Perhaps they were curious. Perhaps they were uncomfortable. Perhaps they wanted to hear whether your soulmate would retreat from the honesty they had just revealed. But your soulmate did not take the words back. Something courageous had awakened in them. They said, "Some people look beautiful because of what they wear. But this person makes you notice what beauty actually feels like." Even the person who had tried to make the moment playful became silent. My child, understand why this matters. Your soulmate was not trying to impress anyone. They were not performing. The words emerged because they had reached a point where hiding their admiration had become more difficult than revealing it. For months, they may have been careful about how others interpreted their feelings. They may have feared judgment, questions, or interference. But in that moment, their admiration became stronger than their fear. Still, what happened next surprised them even more than it surprised everyone else. After speaking, your soulmate felt exposed. They realized they had revealed something deeply personal. Their heartbeat changed. They wondered whether you had heard. They wondered whether someone would repeat the words to you. They wondered whether the truth they had protected for so long was now moving beyond their control. Part of them wanted to leave. Another part wanted you to turn around. This conflict has followed them for longer than you know. They want closeness, but they fear what closeness might require. They want honesty, but they fear what honesty might change. They want to be seen by you, yet they are terrified that you may see every hidden insecurity they have tried to conceal. Your appearance did not merely attract them. It confronted them. It reminded them that you are not standing still. You are growing. You are becoming more confident, more centered, and more aware of your worth. They suddenly understood that while they had been delaying, healing, doubting, and waiting for the perfect moment, you had continued becoming someone extraordinary. And for the first time, they felt the possibility of losing their chance. Stay till the end, because this realization created a decision inside them that no one around them noticed. As the conversation slowly resumed, your soulmate became quieter. Others moved on, but they could not. Their words remained in the air. They kept replaying your entrance in their mind, the way you moved, the expression on your face, the calmness you carried. They wondered what had changed within you. They sensed that you were no longer looking for validation in the same way. That frightened them, but it also drew them closer. Your strength made them admire you. Your independence made them respect you. Your quietness made them curious. And the possibility that you might no longer need their attention made them realize how deeply they wanted to give it. There is something heaven wants you to know here. You have often misunderstood your own effect on people because you tend to focus on the moments when they failed to express what they felt. You believed silence meant indifference. You believed distance meant forgetfulness. You believed hesitation meant the connection was one-sided. But silence can sometimes hide intensity. Your soulmate's silence has not been empty. It has been crowded with questions about you. They have wondered whether you think of them. They have wondered whether you noticed their nervousness. They have wondered whether you felt the same shift they felt whenever your eyes met. They have also wondered whether they waited too long. That day, after admiring your look, they began to understand that you may not remain emotionally available forever. You are not frozen in the moment where they left you uncertain. You are moving forward, even if slowly. You are rediscovering parts of yourself that disappointment buried. And the more you return to yourself, the more powerful your presence becomes. This is what they saw. Not perfection. Transformation. Not an image. A testimony. Not someone trying to be noticed. Someone who had begun to remember they were unforgettable. Your soulmate saw all of this in a single moment, and it shook them. There was another person present who did not respond kindly to the compliment. This person had noticed your soulmate's interest before, but they had assumed it would fade. When your soulmate spoke so openly, this person became uneasy. They asked a question disguised as a joke. They suggested your soulmate was exaggerating. They mentioned someone else who was supposedly more attractive, more suitable, or easier to understand. But your soulmate did not agree. Instead, they said, "You are looking at the outside. I am talking about the way this person changes me." That was the statement that truly surprised everyone. Until then, people could dismiss their words as admiration. But this confession was different. Your soulmate admitted that your presence had an effect on who they were becoming. They admitted that something about you challenged them to be more truthful, more courageous, and more emotionally awake. The room fell silent again. Your soulmate had not planned to say it. In fact, later they would wonder why they had revealed so much. But the truth had been waiting for an opening, and the sight of you created it. You have changed them without chasing them. You have challenged them without demanding anything. You have awakened feelings they thought they could control. And now they are beginning to realize that the connection is not asking them merely to admire you. It is asking them to become brave enough to meet you honestly. Do not skip, because this is where the hidden spiritual layer begins. The reason your soulmate was so affected by your appearance was not vanity. It was alignment. For a brief moment, your outer presence reflected the inner growth heaven has been creating within you. The confidence in your posture came from battles you survived privately. The peace in your eyes came from nights when you chose not to give up. The softness in your expression came from a heart that refused to become cruel after being hurt. Your soulmate saw the fruit of your healing, even if they could not name it. And something within their spirit recognized home. Not a home without challenges. Not a perfect fantasy. But a place where truth could exist. A place where they could no longer hide behind shallow conversations or convenient excuses. A place where love would require maturity. This is why their admiration carried fear. You represent something real. And real love does not allow people to remain unchanged. Your soulmate has been asking themselves whether they are ready for that change. They have been standing between two versions of their life. One version allows them to remain safe, distant, and emotionally controlled. The other requires them to risk being known by you. Until that moment, they believed they had more time to decide. Then they saw you. And suddenly, time felt different. Someone else might notice you. Someone else might recognize what they had been too hesitant to honor. Someone else might speak the words they kept swallowing. This thought entered their mind like a flash, and they could not dismiss it. It was not possessiveness. It was awakening. They realized your beauty would not remain a private discovery. Others would see your warmth. Others would notice your loyalty. Others would feel the peace you carry. And someone with courage might approach you while your soulmate was still waiting for certainty. That possibility stayed with them long after the moment ended. Later, when they were alone, they replayed everything. They remembered how you looked. They remembered what they said. They remembered the stunned expressions around them. But most of all, they remembered the truth hidden inside their own words: "You make everything feel different." They whispered that sentence again when no one could hear. And then another thought came. What if they are meant to change my life? Your soulmate immediately tried to silence the question. It felt too large. Too vulnerable. Too honest. But once the thought appeared, it would not leave. They began remembering moments they had previously dismissed. The first time your presence calmed them. The first time they felt strangely understood without saying much. The first time they became jealous and pretended not to care. The first time your absence affected their mood. The first time they realized that hearing your name changed their expression. All the scattered pieces began forming a picture. Your soulmate understood that their admiration had never been only physical. Your appearance simply brought everything to the surface at once. Something huge is waiting for you in this revelation, because your soulmate did not stop at wondering whether you could change their life. They began asking what they would need to change in themselves to stand beside you. They thought about their hesitation. They thought about the mixed signals they may have given. They thought about the moments when pride made them distant. They thought about how often they had waited for you to make the first move while pretending they wanted nothing. And for the first time, they saw how their silence may have affected you. This realization hurt them. Not because they wanted to feel guilty, but because they finally understood that while they were protecting themselves, you may have been questioning your worth. You may have wondered why someone who seemed to notice you could not speak clearly. You may have felt invisible in the presence of someone who was secretly watching everything. Your soulmate now knows that their silence may have created confusion. And they do not want confusion to become the final chapter. That evening, they considered reaching out. They opened a message and closed it. They wrote a sentence, deleted it, and began again. They tried to make the words casual, but everything they wanted to say was too meaningful to sound casual. They wanted to tell you that you looked incredible, but that felt incomplete. They wanted to tell you that your presence had stayed with them, but that felt too revealing. They wanted to ask whether you had noticed them looking, but they feared the answer. So they waited. Yet something had already changed. Before that day, silence felt safe. After that day, silence began to feel like a risk. My child, your soulmate is approaching an emotional crossroads. They can continue admiring you from a distance, or they can step forward and allow you to see the truth. They can remain protected by uncertainty, or they can become vulnerable enough to discover what this connection could become. And heaven has been placing small signs around them. Not to force them, but to awaken them. They have heard conversations that reminded them of you. They have seen couples whose honesty exposed what they were avoiding. They have received advice from people who did not even know the full story. They have felt an unusual urgency whenever they imagined you moving on. Each sign has been leading them toward one conclusion. They must speak. But there is one final reason they have hesitated, and it is not the reason you think. They are not afraid that you are unworthy of their love. They are afraid that your love may reveal how unprepared they have been to receive something genuine. Your presence reaches places in them that compliments from others never touched. You make them want to become more honest. You make them confront old wounds. You make them imagine a future that requires consistency rather than temporary emotion. That is why the moment felt so intense. They did not simply admire how you looked. They saw the future trying to enter the room. And when they said you changed everything around you, part of them was really confessing that you had already changed something inside them. Stay with this truth. You do not need to chase what is awakening naturally. You do not need to prove your beauty, your value, or your spiritual worth. The right person will not only notice how you look. They will recognize what your presence brings into their life. Your soulmate is beginning to recognize it. But recognition is only the beginning. The next step requires action. And this is where the story turns. Because after everyone had left, one person stayed behind with your soulmate. This person had witnessed every word, every expression, and every attempt your soulmate made to hide what they felt. They waited until the room was quiet. Then they asked a question that struck directly at the fear your soulmate had been avoiding. They said, "Why are you telling all of us what this person means to you when you have never told them?" Your soulmate froze. They had no answer. The question followed them into the silence. It exposed the contradiction they could no longer ignore. They had praised you openly in front of others, yet they had kept you uncertain. They had admitted that you changed them, yet they had not given you the clarity you deserved. The person beside them continued, "One day, someone else may tell them everything you were too afraid to say." Those words unsettled your soulmate deeply. They looked away, but they could not escape the truth. That night, something happened. They made a decision. Not a complete decision, but the first brave movement toward one. They returned to the unfinished message. They read every word they had deleted. They thought about your look, your presence, and the way the room had changed when you appeared. Then they began writing again. This time, they did not start with a compliment. They started with a confession. And the first line of that message contained a truth so unexpected that even you may not be ready for what it reveals, because your soulmate was not only about to tell you how deeply they admire you. They were about to explain what they secretly decided the moment they saw you.